So my name is Dave. I'm product manager on the JIRA team at Atlassian. And I've been on the JIRA team about a couple years now. I have two quick disclaimers before I get started. The first is that this talk is it's only the second time I've given this talk, so there are still some rough edges. I polished some of them last night, but who knows what could happen. The second is that all of the, I promised to talk on how the JIRA team uses JIRA, and so all of the examples in here are taken from real life Atlassian JIRA, and not just real life Atlassian JIRA, but like last week. So, and it hasn't been lawyer approved, so you might see some of this on the screenshots where there's some stuff that's internal that hasn't been released yet. So just bear with me, look over that. So the main thing I want to do today is talk about teams and how Atlassian works together and how the JIRA team works together. This isn't necessarily a talk about how to use JIRA so much as it's how our team works together and JIRA kind of supports our team. At Atlassian, we talk about teams a lot because we make software for teams. Raise your hand if you use JIRA as your personal to-do list by yourself. Yeah, okay, you're weird. Yeah, the point is you're not weird, I promise. But the point is JIRA is a lot more useful when you have the more people using JIRA, the more useful JIRA is to everybody. And if you can get the whole team on it, that's better. If you can get the whole company on it, that's best. If you can get the whole world on it, then you should come work for Atlassian. But this idea of just the development team is kind of short-sighted. The team is a lot more than just the development team. You've got the product managers and the designers. You have project managers, program managers, Scrum masters, product owners, QA. You have the operations, the release people. You have hands waving in front of the screen. You have marketing people, and finally you have the most important person of all. And they're all working together to produce something like that. And so I want to use this metaphor of the hot air balloon, because hot air balloons look really, really, who's ridden in a hot air balloon? Just one. Okay, so doesn't this picture look like really nice and relaxing from a distance and beautiful and well composed? The main thing missing is it doesn't appear that there's people in these hot air balloons. So I think it's been computer generated, but the point stands. Hot air balloons look really great from a distance. And from a distance, a lot of talks at meetups like this look really great, where I get up in front of you and say, there are 3 things you need to do that will revolutionize your team. And once you do those things, you will ship your product tomorrow, and all your problems will be solved. But in reality, inside of this hot air balloon, there's a raging fire. And you get this product out there, and nobody knows about all the crazy, uncontrolled reactions of the developers wanting to do this, and the product manager's been fighting over this thing for weeks and weeks and weeks, and the designer just won't do anything at all because he can't get along with the developers, and the boss has no idea what's going on with anybody. I don't know if that sounds familiar. And the ironic thing about a hot air balloon is that what you basically have is this fire, this uncontrolled reaction that sits inside this envelope, and somehow the hot air balloons are able to take those uncontrolled reactions and actually get the balloon somewhere where it wants to go. So from the distance, you have this beautiful sight, and in the inside, you have chaos. So my main message of what I've learned working on the JIRA team and at Atlassian is to embrace the chaos. And it's not about eliminating chaos or trying to kill chaos with process, but kind of instead just organizing the chaos and accepting that there's some things about working in teams that you can't change. And but if you accept the limitations, you can try to get somewhere. So I want to talk about the JIRA team. And JIRA has been building software for about 12 years, so we've seen a lot. The JIRA team has been a startup at one point in a room like this, and now it's a team with 40,000 customers and 100 developers. We've gone agile. The JIRA started out in a controlled versioning system, and then it went to SVN, and then now we're on Git. And I want to show you how each part of the JIRA team kind of comes together to collaborate in our agile process. And so I'll start with developers. So just some basics about JIRA. So on JIRA, we have one central instance that most JIRA development is done in. We call it, and we take dog fooding really seriously. We call our instance JDog. And so JDog gets a build of JIRA that runs every single night. So whatever is on master at the end of each night is what gets deployed to JDog the next morning. Except that doesn't even tell you half the story, because we have teams in Sydney and Gdansk in Poland and in Saigon in Vietnam. So our instance is actually active at all times of day. So when we say at night in Sydney, that really means that we just interrupt the middle of the day in Gdansk to restart JIRA. But the reason for those constant builds is that we take dog fooding seriously because it's our first trigger of quality. If we're trying to build JIRA with JIRA and we release a bug, or somehow a bug gets on the master, everybody knows right away, because it brings all of JIRA development crashing to a halt. So it kind of forces us to make sure that the stuff that actually gets merged into master is high quality. And another thing we do is we have this button, and this isn't just in our internal instance, but it's in every internal Atlassian instance of JIRA, and actually in all of our internal Confluence instances as well. And it's an issue collector to collect internal feedback. So before anything gets released to all of you, it's already been through a round of dog fooding where anybody at Atlassian can say, hey, this thing doesn't work. Hey, I found a bug. Hey, this feature is stupid. That kind of thing. And we get that feedback and get it right back into JIRA. So how do we do development on the JIRA team? Everyone, you have all these Aussies running in the same, you have all these Aussies running, and you want to try to make sure that they're running in the same direction. And so the overall rule at Atlassian is that all the individual development teams within the JIRA team are independent, and they own their own process. So each group of developers is free to, and actually encouraged to, experiment. So you might have one team that's doing Scrum, one team that's doing Kanban, one team that is stuck with a kind of waterfall project, one team that's using story points to estimate, another team that's using t-shirt sizes to estimate stories. One team has demos every week, one team has stand-ups every other morning. I don't know. And the point is, like, we're all doing all these slightly different things, and the result of that is that when we stumble upon something that's working for one team, we can kind of let that spread to the rest of the team. So because we're trying all these different things, we can learn from one another without trying to say top down, hey, we're going to try this new experiment, and then that kind of results in organizational inertia. So 10 different teams, 10 different processes, a lot going on all at once. We try to keep it organized. So I want to take you through like the anatomy of a JIRA issue on the JIRA team. Maybe it's a good way to see how we collaborate. So we've got this issue, right? This is a real issue from last week. We're going to move the location of the menu item for the JIRA issue collector from the add-ons tab in JIRA to the systems tab within JIRA administration. So it's a pretty simple story. So the first thing you need to know about this issue is that if there's an issue for it and it affects code, there's a branch for it on the JIRA team. So raise your hand if you do feature per branch, branch per feature development within your team. Awesome. That's actually much better than last night. So we take branching for we take branching per issue really seriously. So every single issue gets a branch. Anything that touches code gets a branch. We even built this right into JIRA. So if you're using a newer version of JIRA and you have Bitbucket or Stash connected to it, you can click Create Branch right from the JIRA issue, and it'll branch from master in your connected repository, and you can check it out right away. It sounds like a lot of overhead, especially if you don't have a handy integration like the ones we provide, but it is really important for keeping code quality high. So basically the idea behind it is that you have this issue, JIRA 456, and you create a branch to check it out. And if you have a linear development process, then somebody else starts JIRA 123, and they check out from trunk with JIRA 123 and make some change and merge it back into trunk. Meanwhile, JIRA 456 is, is targeting a different world than the world that it started, than the way trunk looked when you checked it out. And that leads to merge conflicts, which if you're a developer, you know are like the worst hell imaginable. And with branch per issue development, you kind of solve that problem by branching your specific issue for every single issue and merging master back in. And you have an isolated amount of feature work that doesn't get committed back into master until it's done. And when it does and is done, the only difference is the actual feature development. And what that means is that master stays stable instead of changing midway through the development work, and everybody's happy, or at least hopefully you spend less time resolving merge conflicts. So if you think we're not serious about this, I took this screenshot from Stash on Friday. You can see that every single issue in JIRA has a issue key attached to it. So that's just the start of how the development team works. The rest of this presentation is kind of about how the development team works with the rest of JIRA. So, and the first people I want to talk about are us product managers. So due to, despite developers' best efforts, we product managers tend to get in the way with our requests for features and bug fixes and shipping things faster and doing whatever else product managers do. So as the PM for an agile development team, your single job is to communicate the requirements of the business and of the designers and of the CEO and the customer and whoever else to the team. And then what that means is that we don't have a standard way to write issue descriptions. We don't enforce saying as XYZ, do this so that this can happen. We don't have any standard story descriptions. It's just whatever will work for you as a product manager to communicate with your developers. We expect our product managers to be generalists. So that means that you get involved with everything from customer interviews to design to competitive analysis, whatever will help the team ship the right thing faster is what a PM is expected to do. What I've seen is that a lot of product managers get kind of bogged down with this stuff. So they're like, well, maybe if I up the priority on this issue, then the dev team will do it faster. Or do I have all of my stories labeled as stories and all of my bugs labeled as bugs? And is everything labeled correctly? Does it have the correct components? And the fact is that most of this stuff doesn't really matter, and if you're relying on these fields in JIRA to communicate with your development team as a product manager, then you've already failed, because that means because if you need these fields to communicate, that means that you're not actually communicating. At the end of the day, if this stuff doesn't help you ship faster, then what's the point? So the priority doesn't matter. The labels don't matter. What matters is this stuff, communication. And so communication is what happens down here in the description, in the attachments, whatever you have to do to get your point across and get the requirements across. One of my favorite tools is kind of lo-fi, or hi-fi kind of hacked together mockups. So I'll basically take the HTML and CSS from JIRA, and we actually have OWI, which is kind of a system of front-end components. So if I want to add a button, I can just copy and paste some additional HTML and make a lightweight interactive mockup. Sometimes I'll collaborate with the designer on it. It really doesn't take that much effort, and what it allows you to do is kind of discover a lot of those edge cases and those questions that a developer might have before the developer even starts working on the issue. As for specifications, you don't see a lot of formal specs at Atlassian. The basic template for a spec at Atlassian is a statement of the problem with more or less profane language than this. And then basically what must change for, so Renaissance is our internal code word for JIRA 7. So basically, it's what you have to have in order to like the feature cannot be considered done until you have shipped it, and then the other stuff that you think you would like to do, the should-haves. There's a lot of teams have concepts of the must-haves, the should-haves, and the nice-to-haves. Usually, you can leave the nice-to-haves out because, let's be honest, they never get done anyway. And then, designs, lo-fi, hi-fi, sketches, whatever you need to do to communicate. Because at the end of the day, it's that communication between PM and developer that should be the thing that gets prioritized. And, I'll have developers that come up to me and say, hey, am I bothering you? And the answer is no, you're never bothering me, because your job is to bother me, and not for me to be bothering you. And if you're coming to me, that's a good thing. But if I have to come to you, that's a bad thing. And if I'm not answering your questions, then I've already failed at my job. And hopefully you come together and ship something at the end. I would be remiss if I didn't cover designers. Designers work with PMs and engineers from the beginning. We tend to do kind of just-in-time design, so the designers kind of work on things just an iteration or two ahead of where the development team is at. They have their own separate JIRA design project where we can track both the design tasks that are related to the stories that the dev team is working on, and then shared design tasks that are directly related to the individual features. So we have stuff like, if you design a new pattern in JIRA, we want that pattern to be shared across Confluence and Stash and everything else. It's something we take really seriously. It's something we're trying to get better in. If you saw our products 5 years ago, you would have thought that we had 5 different products made by 5 different companies. And now, hopefully, we have 10 products, and they look vaguely similar, at least. So the designers try to share a project that lets them work together and enforce a high quality bar by seeing what each other is working on, while also being embedded in the product team and working hand in hand with the developers. So you've got designers, you've got PMs, and you've got developers so far. Next, I want to talk about QA. So the overarching rule at Atlassian is that developers are the ones that own the quality of the code, not the QA engineers. So at Atlassian, QA doesn't stand for quality assurance, it stands for quality assistance. And the role of a QA at Atlassian is to help the developer on their path towards owning the quality. When you have separated QA, one of the things that tends to happen is it kind of distorts the incentives, because if a developer knows that QA is going to find and fix all of their bugs, then they don't feel any responsibility for fixing the bugs themselves before they get shipped. And the tangible the tangible outcome of developers owning quality in conjunction with the QA is something called what we call the kickoff. Um, you were wondering why I had soccer up for the last minute. So what we do that, so it's the developer's job to find the bugs before they get merged, and it's the QA's job to assist, and they do that in a kickoff. So basically what a kickoff is the developer and the QA sit down after the planning meeting when the story has been assigned to a developer, and they talk through the story. And before the developer starts development, they talk through the story. They talk about, what are the edge cases, what's going on in other teams that might affect this work, how do we think about the customer experience. We've been working a lot on migrations and upgrades recently with JIRA 7, and a lot of that work is really risky to customers. So it's definitely the QA's job to think like, hey, is there any way that this could go wrong and totally screw over a customer? And if there is, then we need to document that. And the outcome of all that development or discussion, is testing notes. So these testing notes are, and on the JIRA team, we actually have a dedicated custom field for testing notes. Some teams put them in the description or in a comment. So the testing notes are basically that outcome of the brainstorm between QA and developer. And it's the developer's responsibility before a pull request gets created for their story that they've verified, in addition to all the functional requirements of the story. They also, the basic testing notes that they've already thought of have all been verified by the developer, not by the QA engineer. So the developer is responsible. But if I was a QA engineer, I would be kind of concerned if I saw this issue. Can anybody tell me why? Oh, this doesn't have a, wait, there we go. I don't use these that often. So you can see here that there's this story has been merged for some reason, but it also has builds failing, which is a big problem if you take your continuous integration seriously. So who would say they're doing some level of CI right now with their code? Okay, all right, well, so the goal of CI is to basically detect problems as early as possible. So CI doesn't get rid of bugs. CI helps you detect bugs before they make it into master, make it back into your main branch of code. And so while the requirements and everything are still fresh in your mind, you find the bugs, find the test that failed, and fix them, and then you merge. So here's what happens. So you have your master, it's green. We run CI with every single commit. So we have this, our feature branch here. The builds are running on master. Once we create that feature branch and push the first commit up to the remote, we start running our, so basically what can happen is, your master is green, you're developing, you merge back in, and something has gone wrong, and master's build goes red. And so it was something in your branch that failed here, but if you have 100 people all committing at once, then it's a lot harder to keep track of which commit to master actually caused master to go red. So continuous integration basically says you're always building master and you're building your feature branches as well. And so that means that my feature branch needs to be green as well before I merge. So basically what happened here is I branched, I did some development. After I pushed, I ran a build, it's green. I did some more development, committed again, build has gone red. That means that there's something that one of our tests has failed. I need to go fix it and make sure my build is green before I merge back in. So going back to here, let's take a look at our build results. So we can see that on the JIRA team, we break our build plans into a couple different tiers. So we have tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 builds, which are in descending order of importance. So you can see that actually all the tier 1 builds passed, which are our functional tests and our unit tests, which basically means that this change actually didn't break anything in JIRA, in the JIRA core build, and therefore it's probably safe for somebody to check out JIRA master, even if some of our other builds failed. So bundled plugins means that a build failed because some other plugin that's also getting bundled with JIRA didn't work. That's probably not the fault of this commit, and you can probably, we'll need to get it fixed before we can deploy JIRA to JIRA Cloud, but it's not going to affect the work of another developer on the team. Anyway, the point is keep the builds green. I know I'm going over, so I'm going to try to kind of hurry it up. So we got a feature developed, tested. There's PM, QA, dev. And now you've got our operations team. So you want to release the thing. So we actually have incorporated JIRA into our release process. So let's say we want to release a new version of the JIRA issue collector with our change. So we create a JIRA issue like this. And this issue is basically what we call a release ticket. And what the release ticket includes is the specific artifact that we want to deploy to JIRA Cloud, our hosted service, and some comments by the developer of the things that they changed that are actually in this artifact. So that's kind of the sum of maybe one commit or 10 commits or 20 different changes. So it might not necessarily be one developer. It might be the team lead writing behalf of 20 developers of the main things that they changed. And the result of this is that if we run this build, or sorry, we deploy this to dog fooding or to our canary group of customers internally, and we find, in some cases, the customer portal goes, returns a 500, we know that maybe this service desk release is the thing that caused it. And we can go back to the service desk team and talk to them about what might be causing these errors, show them the logs and everything. And these release tickets are all tied to an overall weekly deployment ticket for all of Atlassian, which lists everything that we're deploying each week. And this list of things is reviewed by a representative from every single team. We provide status updates for anybody at Atlassian that wants to know how the release is going. They're comment by comment, step by. So each of these comments matches up to a step that's documented. I should have had a slide. A step that's documented in Confluence. That's our release pipeline process. But the thing I wanted to mention at the end here is that you can see that at the end of the day, we actually did not release this. So if you were paying attention, we didn't release JIRA on Monday. Something went wrong here. We had some problem with Agile. I actually wasn't in the office to find out what it was. But the point here is that software development is still chaos. It's really hard to eliminate the chaos, and no matter how much process you have here, something can still go wrong. In the Agile manifesto, there's this, one of the principles is in this individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And that's my favorite part of the Agile manifesto, and I'm saying this as somebody who works on one of those tools. But my message is that at the end of the day, even JIRA is just a tool. So the most important thing I can say is that as a member of the JIRA team, it's to accept the chaos and empower the people on the team to make life better. So just to recap some of the lessons that I have. So first, let the individual teams own the process. It's a good way to experiment and share knowledge across the organization. Culture is #1 above everything else. So best practices come from working together and learning from each other. It's kind of related to the first thing. For PMs, communicate at all costs. You can be the best data analyzer in the world. You can have a second life as a designer. You can give awesome talks at meetups. But if you can't communicate to a developer, then you've basically failed. Then nothing else matters. Fourth, run CI on every single branch for every single issue, and your developers' lives are going to be a whole lot better. And finally, try to bring communication into the release cycle so that I didn't talk a lot about DevOps because this isn't really we'll just say I'm completely unqualified to talk about DevOps, but we have benefited a lot from just making sure that everybody is clued into the release process and knows what's going on. And so make sure that you have that releases aren't going off in a black box in the corner of the office. So this is the JIRA team. We have all these different people, different responsibilities, different goals. We're not perfect. It's not perfect. I know that. You can talk to me about how it's not perfect after. But hopefully we're trying to make something decent. And when JIRA 7 comes out, you'll see the benefits of that collaboration. But thank you so much. Slides are there. Video will be up shortly. Thank you so much for hearing me out.